There's a moment, right after you stop texting her, right after you disappear from her notifications, that a woman starts to feel something unexpected. It's not anger, it's not relief, it's curiosity. And in the world of seduction, curiosity is the seed of obsession. Now listen carefully. When you stop talking to a woman, you don't just vanish from her life, you invade her mind, silently, powerfully. Because silence is never neutral. It either screams neediness or radiates strength. Most men don't understand this. They go quiet, but they don't go strong. They retreat, hoping she'll chase, but they're still emotionally attached. And women feel that. They smell that desperation like blood in the water. But when a man truly pulls back with no expectation, no anxiety, and total inner control, something primal happens. Her mind starts doing the work for you. She begins to fill in the blanks. She replays your last conversation. She wonders why the attention stopped. And that shift, that subtle psychological trigger, is exactly what makes her begin to crave your presence again. This isn't just theory. This is deep psychological conditioning. In Robert Greene's The Art of Seduction, he breaks down how the absence of your presence can be far more seductive than any pickup line, because we are wired to value what is scarce. And when your communication disappears, your attention becomes rare, and anything rare becomes valuable. Let me tell you something most dating coaches won't admit. Attraction isn't built in the talking, it's built in the space between the talking. Women don't fall for your compliments. They fall for the way your energy makes them feel when you're not even there. And if your silence carries mystery, detachment, and grounded masculinity, she will chase that silence like a puzzle she can't solve. Think about this. Every time you text her "good morning," she knows she has you. You've become predictable, you've become background noise. But the moment you break that pattern, not out of manipulation, but out of purpose, her perception shifts. She starts to ask herself, did I do something wrong? Is he losing interest? Did he meet someone else? And that internal questioning isn't bad, it's powerful. Because every time she asks herself those questions, she's thinking about you. She's emotionally investing. She's handing you attention without you lifting a finger. Let me take it further. In Neil Strauss's The Game, one of the most powerful weapons isn't a line, it's withdrawal. Not because it's a trick, but because it creates contrast. Women live in a world where most men over-communicate, most men over-explain, most men over-pursue. So when you do the opposite, not from fear, but from power, you stand out like a king among beggars. Now, I'm not telling you to play games, I'm telling you to reclaim your presence. Because if you've done the work, if you've shown value, if you've created tension, if you've sparked curiosity, then silence becomes your loudest weapon. And here's the twist most guys miss. It's not about making her miss you. It's about becoming the kind of man she wants to come back to. That starts by not being so available, not being so easy to read, and not being so damn eager to be liked. When you stop talking to her, one of two things will happen. If she had no interest, she'll feel relief, and that's your cue to move on with grace. But if there was a spark, even a little one, your silence becomes a mirror. It forces her to confront how much she actually values your presence. And that, my friend, is when the real game begins. And here's where it gets even deeper. Because when you step back and stop feeding her constant validation, something shifts not just in her, but in you. Most men have been conditioned to believe that constant communication equals connection. That if you're not in her inbox, in her DMs, or calling her every night, you're losing her. But that belief comes from insecurity, not from strength. Real connection doesn't need to be babysat. It thrives in space, and when you give a woman space, intentionally, you're showing her that you trust your own value. Women are hypersensitive to emotional energy. If you pull back out of fear, she feels it as weakness. But if you pull back because you're grounded, focused, and living your life, she feels that as power. That difference is subtle, but it's everything. This is why the strongest men in the game don't chase. They attract. They don't rush to reply. They don't panic over delayed responses. They create such a powerful emotional imprint that their silence pulls a woman toward them. Not because they're pretending to be busy, but because they actually are. And that's what you need to understand. If your silence is hollow, if you're sitting by the phone, staring at her stories, counting the minutes since she last texted, you've already lost. But if your silence is filled with movement, mission, and momentum, she'll feel the gravity of your absence. Remember this: women are more drawn to the man who is chasing a vision than the man who is chasing her. That's why when you stop talking to her, it's not just about stepping back. It's about stepping into your own life, into your goals, into your grind. Because the more alive you are without her, the more she'll want to be a part of your world. And don't be surprised when she starts reaching out, when she starts watching your stories more, when she casually texts, "Hey, just saw this and thought of you." That's not random. That's not innocent. That's her way of re-entering your orbit. At that point, it's not about ignoring her. It's about responding with clarity. You're not here to punish. You're here to lead. And leading means staying rooted in your standards. If she reaches out, don't drop everything to prove you're still available. Respond with presence, not with desperation. Show her that her attention is appreciated, not needed. Here's something rarely said, but always true. When you stop talking to her, the spotlight moves from you to her. She starts evaluating herself, her behavior, her attraction, her willingness to invest, and that self-evaluation builds tension. And tension, when handled correctly, builds desire. But if you break that silence too early, if you fold because you're afraid she might forget you, you destroy the effect. You go from being the man who owns his time to being just another guy orbiting her attention. Let me be brutally honest. She won't chase a man who can't sit with uncertainty. Women test for emotional strength, not with words but with silence, with distance, with ambiguity. And if you collapse under that pressure, if you seek constant reassurance, you fail the test. But if you stand still, confident in your own frame, you pass with flying colors. Not because you're pretending to not care, but because you genuinely value your own peace over someone else's approval. And that mindset, that's what makes her rethink everything. She replays your moments together. She remembers how she felt when she was around you. She starts comparing you to every other man she knows, and none of them hit the same. Why? Because they're chasing. And you're choosing. That energy is magnetic. And it's rare. Most guys are predictable. But you become the question she can't answer. The moment she can't replicate. The feeling she can't shake. And that's where true attraction lives, in the unknown. She'll try to distract herself, let's be clear about that. She'll go out with friends, post stories designed to trigger you, maybe even flirt with other men. But here's the secret. When a man walks away with certainty, no amount of external noise can mute the internal echo he leaves behind. You see, women remember how you made them feel, especially in your absence. If your energy was confident, unpredictable, and centered, then the silence you leave behind isn't emptiness, it's tension. And tension is addictive. It's the unsolved riddle, the unfinished song, the chapter that ended mid-sentence. It keeps her mind circling back, looking for closure, or even just another taste of that unique energy. Now here's where it gets psychological. According to attachment theory, people are wired to respond to loss with heightened emotional focus. When someone they're attached to withdraws, the mind amplifies their importance. This is the Zeigarnik effect, our tendency to remember unfinished emotional experiences more intensely than complete ones. And when you stop talking to her, you trigger that exact response. But only if you've laid the groundwork. And that's where most men screw this up. They disappear, without ever having created an emotional experience worth missing. They were too nice, too accommodating, too eager to please. So when they go silent, the woman feels nothing. No loss, no gap, no spark. That's why it's not just about going quiet. It's about who you were before the silence. Were you a man who left a mark? Or were you just another pleasant, forgettable guy? Because the truth is, silence only works as leverage when your presence had real weight. This is where the concept of value stacking comes into play. The more experiences you create, moments of mystery, tension, emotional stimulation, the more potent your absence becomes. So when you stop talking, she's not just missing your words. She's missing the roller coaster you created. She's missing you as an experience. And when a woman misses an experience, she starts fantasizing. She fills in the gaps with idealized versions of you. She exaggerates your best traits. Her mind romanticizes even the simplest details. That's not manipulation. That's psychology. That's human nature. We crave what made us feel alive. But let me flip it around for a second. because this silence doesn't just impact her, it transforms you too. When you stop talking to her, you reclaim something sacred, your focus. Your energy is no longer scattered in a cycle of waiting, checking, reacting. It turns inward. You start remembering what you were building before she showed up. You stop orbiting her world and begin reinforcing your own. And that, ironically, is what draws her back in. Women don't want a man who needs them to feel whole. They want a man who is whole, with or without them. A man who doesn't flinch in silence, who doesn't need external permission to be powerful, who doesn't crumble in emotional limbo. This isn't coldness, it's composure. And the more you master that, the more you become unforgettable. Because a woman doesn't long for the guy who chased, she longs for the man who didn't need to. Now pay attention to this next part. When she starts reaching out again, when the texts come in, the just checking on you messages, the sudden likes on old posts, she's not always aware of what she's doing. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's instinctual. Either way, it's a signal. She's trying to re-engage, to feel that energy again. But you can't lose your frame here. Most men, the moment she reaches out, react emotionally. They get excited, they rush back in, eager to reconnect. And just like that, the mystery evaporates, the attraction drops, because the balance of power resets, and she knows she can pull you back at any time. What you need to do is stay grounded. Treat her message not like a lifeline, but like data, a sign, a point of information. Respond when it fits your rhythm. Keep the interaction light, confident, and centered on your values. You're not punishing her. You're just not validating neediness. You're not running a game. You are the game. And in that space, at where she feels the pull but can't control it, that's where real desire begins to grow. And as that dynamic unfolds, something profound begins to happen in her subconscious. She doesn't just wonder where you went, she starts questioning who you really were. She begins reanalyzing every detail of your presence, the things you said, the moments of tension, the looks you gave her that no one else noticed. All of it becomes amplified in the vacuum you left behind. Because when a man steps away with elegance, he forces a woman to reframe him. He goes from being available to being intriguing, from being familiar to being rare. And rarity is the foundation of fascination. Most women are surrounded by options. Messages, compliments, attention, it's noise. But when you remove your signal from that noise, it becomes the signal she starts scanning for. She can scroll through 100 DMs, but if none of them carry the emotional weight that yours did, they all feel empty. And here's where it goes deeper. When a woman starts thinking about you in the silence, she doesn't just remember you as you were, she begins to imagine you evolving without her. That's where urgency kicks in. The idea that while she's overanalyzing, you might be moving on, becoming sharper, more successful, more attractive. Now you're not just absent, you're ascending. And that image? That's intoxicating. But again, this doesn't work if your withdrawal is weak. If your energy is still orbiting her on social media, watching every story, liking her posts, indirectly begging for attention, she sees it, and it kills the mystery. True psychological presence isn't shown in passive digital breadcrumbs. It's shown in your ability to detach fully, without bitterness, and with absolute confidence. Because when you do that, when you truly step into your own self-worth, you flip the polarity. She starts to feel what you used to feel, the waiting, the wondering, the urge to fill the silence. And she starts to question, did she misread your interest? Did she overplay her hand? Was there more depth to you than she gave credit for? And now you live rent-free in her mind, not because you forced yourself in, but because you walked out at the right time. Now let's explore something most men never consider: emotional displacement. When a woman feels unresolved emotion toward a man she's no longer talking to, she begins projecting that emotion onto her daily life. She hears a song and thinks of you. She smells a scent that brings up a moment you shared. She sees someone who reminds her of your posture, your voice, your style. That displacement becomes involuntary. And when emotions become involuntary, they become powerful. Because she's no longer choosing to think about you, you've become a trigger for emotional recall. That's when desire becomes obsession. And obsession isn't created through words. It's created through restraint, through controlled presence, through being a man who understands that less communication, when done right, leaves a deeper mark than constant validation. So what's your role in all this? To remain unpredictable, to remain focused, to move through your world with purpose? Not for her, but for you. Because that energy is magnetic. Not only does it shift how she sees you, it reshapes how you see yourself. You stop needing her response to validate your masculinity. You stop waiting for her to reflect your worth. You become the source of your own power. And that change is permanent. Because once you realize that your silence can speak louder than 1,000 messages, you stop over-explaining, you stop proving, you stop performing. And women feel it. They feel the difference between a man who acts confident and a man who doesn't need to act at all. That's when the shift becomes undeniable. You've stepped back not out of spite, but from strength. And while she might have pretended not to notice at first, she starts to feel it now, like a song stuck in her head with no ending, no resolution. Every man around her seems louder, needier, easier to figure out. And that contrast only magnifies what you brought to the table without even trying. See, women are deeply tuned into energy. They sense when a man has stopped chasing not because he gave up, but because he simply doesn't need the chase anymore. It's not indifference, it's clarity. And clarity is rare. At this stage, if you've played your cards with authenticity and emotional detachment, her mind is already spiraling. She might not admit it. She might still post like everything's fine. But deep down, there's a glitch, a disruption in her emotional rhythm. Something isn't sitting right, and that something is you. This is what makes the silence so powerful. It becomes a mirror. It reflects her own patterns, her own emotional inconsistencies. Maybe she took you for granted. Maybe she pushed a little too far, thinking you'd always be there. But now, you're not. And the weight of that hits harder than any argument, any text, any closure talk. And here's the twist. The longer you stay quiet, not as a tactic, but as a man grounded in his path, the more you trigger a psychological loop in her mind. She starts rewriting history, romanticizing it. The minor flaws fade. The positive highlights glow brighter. Your imperfections begin to look like edges she wants to understand. And that shift in narrative, that's where emotional gravity kicks in. Because here's the thing, when a woman starts to chase, it rarely looks like what men expect. It's not always bold. Sometimes it's subtle. A reaction to a story, a random comment, a song sent with no context. It's her way of testing the waters, trying to see if the door is still open without looking like she's walking back. And if you're paying attention, you'll see these signals for what they are, not just casual touches, but subconscious invitations. But even here, especially here, you can't break formation. If you rush back in, if you drop the mystery, if you undo everything your silence built, the balance resets. And with it, the desire fades. Because what made you attractive wasn't your attention. It was your absence of need. This is where the most powerful men double down. Not on ignoring her, but on building themselves, sharpening their edge, expanding their world. Because if and when she comes back, she's not returning to the man she left. She's returning to someone even more compelling. And that comparison, the man you were versus the man you've become, is what flips the dynamic forever. Let's go one layer deeper. When she begins to reinvest, she's not just chasing you, she's chasing how she felt around you. That emotional experience is now linked to your identity. And if you've maintained integrity throughout, she'll sense that reconnection not as you bending, but as you allowing. It's not a reset, it's a recalibration. On your terms. Because now you're the man who didn't need to chase, who didn't need to prove, who was willing to walk away. Not to win, but because you refused to shrink for someone else's comfort. And that realization hits hard. It hits because it's rare. And the rarest men are the ones who can move on, evolve, and remain open, but never needy. This is exactly where most guys either level up or fall apart. Because the moment you get that validation, that ping of interest, it's tempting to slip back into the old pattern. To flood her with attention, to overcorrect, to reprove your worth. But that temptation, that's the test. The real seduction isn't in what you say next. It's in what you don't say. It's in how well you hold your ground. How deeply you embody the man you claimed to be when you went silent. And now, she starts to fold. She'll reach out more directly. Her messages carry more emotional weight. Her questions start digging. Not because she's casually curious, but because your absence carved a space in her psyche she can't ignore anymore. And if you've stayed consistent, present in your purpose, sharp in your focus, unshaken in your masculine core, then everything you've done has built to this exact moment. You didn't chase her. You didn't beg. You didn't perform. You became the experience that replays in her head. And now, without even trying, you are the one being pursued. That's not a trick. That's power. And this is the lesson most men never learn. Walking away, when done from strength, not spite, triggers more desire than any line, any gift, or any forced gesture ever could. Because when you stop talking to her, you don't just leave a void, you leave a mark. One that lingers, one that grows, one that teaches her that you are not like the rest. So if this resonated with you, if you saw yourself in this dynamic, or if you're living it right now, I want you to do one thing. Drop a comment below and tell me what stage you're in. Are you in the silence? Is she chasing again? Are you rebuilding your power? Because your story isn't just yours, it's fuel for other men out there who need to hear this truth. And if you found value in this breakdown, if it helped you see the game from a higher level, hit the like, share it with your crew, and make sure you're subscribed, because this channel isn't about tricks. It's about transformation. It's about helping you become the kind of man women respect, desire, and can't forget, even in silence. I'll see you in the next video, brother. Stay sharp, stay grounded, and always stay in control.